Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and what I want to do is introduce you to my newest library, merced-react-hooks. What this is a library of just very minor helpful hooks. They're just going to reduce a little bit more of your boilerplate, make your code a little bit more semantic, but they're not like doing anything super complex. They're minor assists, and I'm going to keep adding hooks to this library. So hopefully over time it becomes kind of like the Lodash of React hook libraries, where it's just like a lot of sort of basic useful hooks that are pretty useful in pretty much any project. So let's create a new React project. So I'm going to open up, let's just go to the main folder here. So I'm in my React folder, and I'm going to use my create React basic tool, create React basic. Okay. And we'll just call this project 3. And that'll spin up a new React project. What's this over here? Oh, I guess this still thought the server was running? No, that's from before. Okay, cool. And there we go. CD into project 3. Okay, and then I'm going to do an npm install just so I can install all the library it needs out of the box. So it's doing that. And then we'll install the hooks. Okay, so then let's npm install merced-react-hooks. Cool. So we'll go through each hook. First hook is my useDataStore hook. This is a hook that existed in my other library, useDataStore, which was only that hook. So I'm bringing over that hook plus along a bunch more. So the way this hook works is we go to, okay, let's see here. Let me think. What am I thinking? Oh yeah, that's right. We're gonna go over here to, oh, actually I'm gonna do it over here in the main folder, the source folder. I'm gonna create a new file, and we're gonna call this ds.js, stands for data store. So the idea is that the data store is gonna be sort of your global application state. So what I did here is just automate a lot of the boilerplate for using use context and use reducers. So this is something you could do pretty easily just in normal React, but the idea is that this will save you a lot of boilerplate in getting all this part done. So essentially the way this works is that first we need to define the initial state in a reducer. So first we'll define an initial state. So we'll say const initial state equals an object with the variable count, which is 0. Then we need to have a reducer. So you define your reducer function. And again, if you haven't used reducers before, essentially it's a function that takes in 2 arguments. It takes in const, and I actually use this hook, or I use this pattern in my Ruby React build video series. Const initial state, const reducer, and basically what it does, it takes in 2 things. It takes in the current state, and it takes in an action. Okay, and the action is typically a object. Let me just set this up right. Okay, and typically what you do is you're going to use the action to determine sort of what to do. Whatever this function returns becomes the new state. So basically what you're doing is you're creating a lot of your state application logic, and you're kind of housing it in one function, in one file. So that way your components have sort of less of that logic cluttering in them. So if you want to know what happens in different situations, you just go here. So typical pattern is the action will be a object with 2 properties, a type and a payload. So we're going to do a switch that's based on the action type. Okay. And essentially there, we create different situations that will update the state based on the type. Typical examples like add and subtract. So let's just do case add. Okay, case add, and what we're going to do is we're going to just say return. The state's now a new object that includes the current state and the state, and then a new state and a property called count, because that's what we're updating. And count is now going to equal state.count plus 1. Okay, and then just like any switch, we then put a break statement. Okay, and then we just do another one. Okay, and this one will be sub for subtract. So this will be the same thing, except now it's -1. And then last, we do a default. And for default, it'll just return the current state. Nothing changes. So basically, if it doesn't fit one of these action types, then it just moves on with life. Okay, so there's our reducer. And then we would just continuously add things to here as we develop our application. Okay, so now that that's all set up, now we can use the data store. Okay, for that we need to import the library. So let's see here. Const, the only thing I really want from the library is create data store. And that's from merced. Oh, that's right. It's import. You can tell I just woke up. Okay, import create data store from merced-react-hooks. Good. And then we're going to use it. Do this here, so it'll be const, and then this is we're going to receive an array with, and we're going to want to export this line. Okay, and this is we're going to receive a provider component or a context component, which we'll call this data store, and then we're going to get a hook. So this component we're going to use as a provider. And in this component, we're going to have useDataStore, which is going to be our hook to grab the data from the data store. Okay, by default, what's going to be provided is the state and the dispatch function from useReducer. Okay, so and then I just say equal create data store. Okay, and then we need to pass in the initial state and the reducer. There we go. Okay, your initial state has been created. Okay, so now we could just, to use it, we could just import it into any component. So let's go to app. And since we're going to be testing out a lot of these hooks here, let's just import. First, we're going to import actually, first I got to go to index.jsx. Here I'm going to import data store from /ds. Okay, and basically again that's a provider component, so we just wrap our application component kind of like you would wrap router around app. Okay, and there you go. Now that is being provided to your entire application, so you have application wide state. Okay, see, that wasn't too bad to set up. Okay, I think that's a lot less boilerplate than if you were to use Redux or just use reduce or use context on its own. Okay. So then here we're going to import useDataStore. Okay, and useDataStore, again, we're taking it from /ds. Okay, and then here we would just say const. Okay, and then we're getting an object with state and dispatch. Okay. And I always actually forget the, let's just start with that. State dispatch. I think it might be called DataStore, but because we have to destructure based on its right name, but we can always adjust that. Equals useDataStore, and again, it's essentially underneath the hood. It's just a use context hook. It's already pulling from that context that was created within that use create DataStore function. Okay, so let's test it out. See if we have that state. npm run dev. Okay, Control-Shift-I. Let's go to the dev tools. So see the context provider. So you see here, yep, so it's DataStore and dispatch, so I gotta fix that. So I go to the app, we go to DataStore. Okay, so I need to go bring in the DataStore, so let's do that. What's this one? So this should be DataStore. There you go. So you're bringing in, so you always destructure DataStore and dispatch. And then, let's say this is, let's just make this a fragment. And now we can just as easily just sit there and say, hey, I want this to be the DataStore dot count. Okay, and that's pulling in from our global state. So if I go back to the browser, see it's 0. Oop, nope, not that one. And then if we were to create a button, so let's create a button. Okay, button, let's give the button an onClick function, and that onClick function is passing, it's just going to invoke dispatch, and dispatch is going to be passed an object, that's the action, and the action should have the type, which is going to be add, and I'm not passing it a payload. Usually there would be a payload, so I'll just kind of put it there for placeholder, as a placeholder, which is going to be null. Okay. Yeah. Okay, and then I need to, well, let's do a closing tag for that button. And then here we just say add. Control C. Add another button, and then this one will be sub. See, so this is this property that will figure out what to do in the switch. And then here we'll say subtract. And that should do it. You can see there we're updating the application-wide state. So if I go to context provider here and I take a look at the store, see we're updating it. Very nice. Okay, cool. So that's the useDataStore hook. So the very easy way to have application-wide state. Very nice. Okay, other hooks we have in this library. Okay, import useForm. Okay, I think it's actually useFormState from merced-react-hooks. Okay, so this is gonna be for like a form. Okay, so let's just put some more space down here. So typically in React, you want to do a form using React hooks. Basically, what you have to do is you have to create a piece of state for that form. Then you'd have to create a handle change function. And it's generally always the same setup. And then you have to reset the form. So what this does, it just kind of gives you those pieces right off the bat to make it the spin up quicker. So first I'll create the form. Form. Okay. And then it'll just have one input tag to keep things simple. One input type equals text, and name equals name, because it's you're putting in your name. Okay, so that's the input, and then we're gonna put a submit button. Input submit. Input type equals submit. And name, or no, value equals click me. Okay, so there's our form. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll use our hook. So in this case we do const, and this is going to be an array. So we're going to get our form data, so that's our state. Then we're going to receive our handle change function. Then we're going to receive our reset form function. And this all equals useFormState. And useFormState just takes in the initial state of the form. So all this form has is name, which is going to be an empty string. So now I can finish the boilerplate on the form. So I can just be like, the value is bound to form data.name. And on change, we run the handle change function. And I don't have to write that handle change function because it's all built in. Value equals form data. Well, that doesn't need to be bound, so just one form field, so that works. Okay, and let's just double check that that's working. So now if I look inside app, I see here we have the form state. Okay, and we have state called name, so if I type in the field, okay, cool, it's bound, nice. Okay, now let's see if we can reset the form. So let's add a onSubmit event. OnSubmit equals, let's create an arrow function. Okay, and the arrow function takes in the event. And basically we need to do event.preventDefault to prevent the refreshes. And then we need to, I want to alert form data.name. And it's just so you can see that the name is there. And then we're going to reset the form, which should reset it back to blank. Okay, and which just kind of makes resetting the form easier too, because it resets it back to your initial form state. So I go blah 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 blah. I hit click me. There it is. There's the name. Then I hit OK and see the form blanks out, and we'll see the form state's back to its initial state. Ta-da! Okay, that made forms a lot easier. Okay, cool. Next one. Use local storage and use session storage. So let's pretend you're building a front-end application and you're using JWT tokens, JWT tokens, and you want to save them in local storage. Okay, it can be kind of a time-consuming process putting in all that logic. This will make it a lot easier. So what you would do is here's const. You're going to get the state, which will in this case we'll call it the auth state, because chances are there'd be more stuff other than just the token. You might store the username, other details that you'd want to store. You would get back the set auth, so it's the set state function, but it's going to be a slightly modified one because it's going to update local or session storage each time. And you're going to get the reset, which is going to allow us to clear, so reset auth. So when someone logs out, you can just use reset auth. It'll clear the state and clear local storage. Okay, and that's going to equal use local storage. And then what we do here is we pass in the key. So we'll say auth and then the initial value. And we're going to, in this case, we're just going to say, hey, it's only supposed to have a token. So I pass in an object with a token key. Okay, and then right off the bat, what it's going to do, it's going to check to see if there's a key called auth in local storage. If not, it creates it. So if I go to application in my DevTools and I go to local storage and I go to localhost 4000, and then we see here it created, well, that's a auth token. That must be from a previous application. Okay, so in that case, if it saw that the if it sees that the key already existed in local storage, then it should have already adapted it to state. So let's go back to components, take a look at the state, local storage, and see, look, it already pulled the token from local storage, because it always checks first. It checks, is this key already exist in local storage? If so, this state's going to equal that. If it's not there, it creates the item in local storage and creates the state with the initial value we passed in. So if I were to go back and then delete this thing, Okay, and then refresh the page. See, it adds the auth token back, and see, it adds it as a blank, kind of like we specified it before. Cool. So it works. Now, the only difference between this and local storage is, this and session storage, is that the session storage function saves it in session storage. Okay, so then if I do this, I just change this to session storage, it'll do the same thing, just in session storage. So now if I go to session storage here, there it is. Cool. Okay. Now let's show you what that reset function does. I keep going to this blue one. Okay, so let's add a button at the end of all this. This will just be called reset. And on click, equals. And what this one will do is just run that reset function. So reset auth. Okay, cool. And we'll see what this is going to do is remove, it'll clear out the state. So let's actually let's go to session storage, see, and see you got the token. Let's change the value of this token. Here we go. Let's say token is blah 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 blah. Okay. So there's the value. Now if I hit reset, you can see this is going to be reset to its initial, or back to null. Okay. And then the token, wait, what am I looking there? The token, if I go back to application, has been reset as well. Well, actually, let me try this again. There we go. And there, see, it gets removed. Now let me refresh the page. Let me try this again. Let me modify this state. So let's see here, token, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that's the local storage right now. If I hit reset, see, it gets reset. Okay. Cool. So that's how that works. And if I do it again, I have to see why sometimes it resets it and sometimes it removes it, but I'll inspect that. Cool. So that's how the reset button works. So that's what use local storage, use session storage does. And once again, I went to the blue one. Okay, and the last ones I have so far are use mount, or yeah, use on mount, use on update, and use on dismount. And these really don't do much. They're really just use effect. But the idea was, oftentimes you'll see people with different use effects in their code, and what their intention with their use effect isn't always clear. Like, is this for the purpose of dismounting? Like, you use effect more and more, you understand what you're seeing, but you know, semantics are nice, and that was one of the nice things about the lifecycle functions in classes. That when you saw on mount, you kind of knew what the intention was, on update, on dismount, etc. So you can still use effect and do all three in sort of one, but this allows your code to be a little bit more semantic. So I could sit there and say, hey, at the beginning, you know, use on mount. And the nice thing about use on mount, since I know this function is built to just make something happen once, I don't have to worry about like dependency arrays, all that stuff's under the hood. I just pass a callback. So I just pass my callback, and I'll say console.log on mount. Okie dokie. And then use on update, which this one isn't too different. This is literally just essentially use effect, just allows you with the dependency array. but at least you can explicitly, it's just clear that you're making something that's going to run on update. So if I say, hey, console.log on update, I might have to pass in the dependency array, and we'll just say, hey, anytime form data dot name changes, we will run this. Okay, and then for dismount, what we'll do is I'll just create another component. So const dummy, it's the dummy component. So put a capital dummy equals props. This one's going to be really straightforward. It's just going to return an h1 saying I exist. And then we'll have a hook that says use on dismount. And you just, and here I don't have to worry about passing in a function that returns another function. I just pass in a callback. This is probably the nicest of the three as far as simplifying doing something. And I just say console.log I don't exist. Okay, so now we just need to make that component exist and not exist. So what we'll do is we'll make it conditional. So we'll say, hey, whenever form data.name equals a blank string, which it should be initially, then we are going to render the dummy component. And when form data is anything else, when I do the first keystroke, it'll disappear. Okay, so let's go back and take a look. So see, we see I exist, and I see on mount update. Now if I hit one keystroke here, okay, so see that disappears. So see, when it got dismounted, I don't exist. And since I updated form data.name, on update ran. Now if I put another keystroke, on update keeps running, but the other two only ran when they were supposed to. So there you go. That's what I have right now in the hooks. I'll add more. I just got to think of more sort of simple use cases, because again, the idea here is I don't want to create anything too specialized. It's just going to be more things. So I'll probably create some stuff regarding, like, you know, creating state that's bound to like fetch calls, different things. So we will see how that goes, and I will keep you guys updated as I create more fun React hooks to make your life easier. So have a great day. If you guys enjoyed this, do share, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, head over and join the Slack and Discord channel over there at devnursery.com. And yeah, otherwise have a wonderful day.